So the U.S. is bringing in and managing, millions of visas a year, whereas there are many of the other countries don't have that volume, but they have the same restrictions. And then just adding in, because we touched on the UK earlier, the UK has, not only is it very difficult to go in, it's very expensive, right? So you're looking to spend on a visa for the UK 25 to 30 grand per visa, and that, depending on the size of your organization, that's very restrictive, right? Organizations like CBRE or other companies who have the funds to sponsor that immigration to that country, it's great. But imagine mid-size organizations that $30,000-$40,000 is impactful, then that's restrictive.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. On Thursday, September 19th, I'll be in Houston to attend Texas SHRM's Global Business Conference. Last week, we were joined by Meredith Morris, the conference's director, and this week, we're joined by Francisco Solis, who will be one of the presenters at the conference. Francisco leads the Global Immigration Program at the real estate services company, CBRE. He oversees CBRE's global immigration strategy and has over 16 years of in-house experience in immigration, international HR, and expatriate management. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Francisco.
Well, thank you for having me here, Mike. We're really excited about this podcast. So looking forward to an exciting conversation.
Yeah, that's all on you, because all I do is ask dumb questions, but we'll see where it goes, okay?
There we go.
So you're over immigration strategy at CBRE. And I think for many of us, when we think about immigration strategy, we're thinking about foreign nationals coming to the U.S. to work. But for an organization with the size and scope of CBRE, I expect it's a little bit more complicated than that. So what does your immigration strategy look like for CBRE?
Yeah, when we talk about strategy, I try to think about it, educate the various leaders and various stakeholders with the full life cycle of immigration, beyond just, hiring someone and relocating them to a new country. We're looking at it, we're trying to empower and educate the leaders to think about it from the perspective of whoever you hire, whoever your talent acquisition team is bringing in, the quality of that foreign national and employees impacts the overall arching, organization. So when we talk about immigration strategy, we want them to consider, okay, what type of foreign national are you hiring? What is the full life cycle that you envision this employee to be? You're obviously hiring a top talent. What does that mean in the next 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now? And really educating them, okay, what can we do for this foreign national after we hire him? What are our long-term paths for this individual? And if they are that top talent that you're looking for, what opportunities are we giving this individual to grow in their career? So that's what we consider, immigration strategy, but it's almost immigration/talent strategy that we're really working with the organization.
And y'all have operations like in the EU and in other places around the globe, right? CBRE is just not North America.
CBRE is a 115,000 person organization, and we have around 85,000 of those employees are across the globe. So EU, APAC, all of the regions. So it is a massive organization. So as you can imagine, we have a massive talent pool that we can leverage inbound to the U.S. and across other countries.
So when y'all are looking for talent, let's set aside looking for talent to work physically in the U.S. and just, you're APAC or in the EU or someplace, you've got a need. I'm assuming you first look locally for that need, but even though you're U.S. based, you may find the best quality and talent for this lead, for this role in another country from yet a third country, right? And how much do y'all do between expats, between non-U.S. countries, things like that?
You're spot on, Mike. We obviously like to look at first, we want to be respectful of the various countries, right? Many countries want to protect the jobs of their citizens. So we first look at the talent pool in that country for those local nationals. If we can't find that talent there for that specific role, we look within the region, within APAC. And if we can't find that role, then we'll start looking at other continents, other countries, so EU, UK, anywhere where an office. We'll try to find that talent internally first before we go out to the job market as well. So we really try to maximize our internal resources plus our local nationals before we look at immigration. We don't want immigration to be the only strategy. We want to leverage everything else that comes along with filling that role.
So you've got an immigration strategy, and like you said, it's really immigration slash talent management, and where we're going to recruit and staff employees from. At CBRE, when y'all are looking at your talent strategy, how does it tie back into corporate strategy? And do those things tend to, as corporate strategy changes, how is your immigration slash talent management strategy changing?
100%. They're all interwoven into each other. And I think that's part of the educating the leadership, right? So the way it works with CBRE when we're looking into a new market, right? So whether we're managing a specific building there where we're getting a new contract with a new organization, whether it's a government entity or a new, Fortune 500, 100 organization, it may be a new location that we don't have an entity in, that we don't have that presence that we are required to have to be able to hire people. So we really work together with our mergers and acquisitions team and our legal teams to look at, okay, we have this potential contract in XYZ country. What do we need to do to register that entity in that country to be able to support immigration or just in general employment in that country first? Then that's sort of how we really like to be at the ground level of that strategy, right? Because what we want to avoid is going to this country, have this client tell us they need a specific skill that we don't have internally, and have to go back and restructure the registration with the government and say, wait a minute, give us, as you know, Mike, it takes 3, 6 months, 9 months, even a year to do a country registration. We don't want to go back to the client and say, hold on, give us a year. We want to be ready. So I think for my perspective, what we've been able to achieve here at CBRE and many of the other organizations that I've been a part of is to really have a seat at the table early on to give them that insight and the knowledge to the leadership and legal team to say, hey, this is a component that we need to consider for the future. Whether we leverage it or not, it's a different story.
I'm guessing a lot of CBRE's leadership is based in the U.S. or North America? Is that right? Or is it pretty much dispersed across the country, the world too?
It really is dispersed, right? We have CBRE has a lot of different business units that don't sit within the U.S. So we have a lot of leadership spread all over the place. So a lot of our top C-suite leadership is in the U.S., but we have a lot of management directors and executive directors across every entity across the world.
So one of the things that comes up a lot domestically here inside the U.S. is employers who suddenly find that they're multi-state employers without intending to be. They've got a remote employee who suddenly moved to Georgia or Oklahoma or wherever, and the employer wasn't aware of it until something probably went wrong, and they got a letter from a tax office or somebody saying, "Hey, you pay up." And I can imagine internationally, especially like someplace like the EU where people transfer around a lot, there are probably similar circumstances like that. But I think that, I've got a friend who was traveling. I think I talked to Meredith about it last week. Was traveling to Canada to do some client training and got stopped at the border. And she just told them what she was doing, and she didn't have a visa qualified for that. And she got stopped. How much business can an executive do if you're traveling to visit sites and maybe interview people or talk to customers? What does that process look like to make sure that you're not stepping on the toes of government regulators in another country?
Well, that's a really loaded question there, Mike, because
Okay.
it's a,
Yeah, I'm asking you to confess all your sins right here on the podcast, Francisco.
yeah, this is a really complicated topic simply because different countries have different regulations, right? So, in the UK, you have the posted worker notification that you have to be able to notify the government when someone's on site doing XYZ type of work. What I would say is we partner very closely with our travel department in ensuring as to when an executive travels abroad. We're talking about even up to when they're traveling, entering the international air. We need to be able
Oh,
to
wow.
very explicitly say, hey, this individual is traveling to this country for this many days. As you can imagine, we have retained very many tax experts to try to help us navigate through this. There isn't, unfortunately, from what I've seen in my 16 years, there isn't that one company that can give you the full service of to track this, right? Nobody's able to do not only the work immigration or the business traveler and tax. So it's really multiple providers that we were having to leverage to try to keep as much as compliant as we can. And I use that, as it sounds, as compliant as we can, because we do have, we want to be able to represent a good faith effort in trying to track and maintain compliance. Where a lot of companies may not have the resources to even do that good faith effort. They're just sort of still tracking on a spreadsheet.
Well, certainly, I travel internationally for fun. I've got family internationally and go see, folks and go with my wife different places. And I own my company and I'm checking email. Maybe I'm recording a podcast in the UK, those kinds of things that we've had to do just because of scheduling, and sometimes you just take your chances, I guess. And, but it always, because had this friend who went through this thing with Canada, it always makes me a little nervous, to what, I'm traveling primarily for pleasure. That's what I always tell them at customs. And it's true. And nobody's ever challenged it. But I can imagine with a larger organization with a lot more to lose, especially in the way of business relationships and complicated tax relationships and all that, you've got to be really cautious.
Yeah, 100%. I think we try to keep advise our leadership to use common sense, right? I mean, we know that there's a very fine line. When you get to that level of C-suite executives, you're not truly doing hands-on work per se. You're hosting meetings, you're meeting clients, you're replying to emails. That could be constituted mainly as a business trip. It's so they're not creating code or things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most countries give you the ability to host meetings, sign contracts, and meet with the clients. So for the most part, from that perspective, it's a lot of common sense. Where we just want to, what we want to avoid is having an executive sit in a country for more than 30 days or 2 weeks at a time, and then we really keep an eye on the country's regulations of 90 days every 180 days, and we really try to navigate on the I'm very much a risk adverse person because of course immigration. So we
Sure.
really try to navigate through that very carefully and just let them know, hey, here's things that you may need to consider.
So there's not even a standard as far as from country to country about how long you can be in a country to work and do some sort of work. And so you have to pay attention even at that level. So give me what's the, off the top of your head, what you can think of as the shortest period that, in a certain country versus the most liberal amount of time that that other countries allow.
I think the standard advice that I've seen in many companies and through a lot of benchmarking is 30 to 60 days. 30 being the safest, right? You can be there to a certain country, in that country for a certain time. India's tax regime is extremely particular. So anytime we have employees going to India, we tell them no more than 30 days. If you're going to stay there beyond 30 days, you need to consult with the tax expert and then also corporate tax team. Mexico is pretty lenient because with Mexico you can even go work there for 180 days without a work visa. So obviously their tax regime is a bit more loose than because it's tied to that immigration. But There's the permanent establishment where our corporate tax comes into play. So we really try to advise no more than 30 days across the board. Try to set that, level set that across the organization. We don't like to operate in an exception, environment. If there's one exception here and there, that's fine. We don't want it to be a continuous exception request from everyone.
And permanent establishment, that means that you've been operating there enough days or enough time that now you've got a legal footprint in that country, and you, in the whole organization, you need an entity, you need all of the things in order to be able to operate that way.
Correct. And that's where corporate tax and our legal teams come into play. And well, obviously that's something that we want to avoid, if we can. If there's a need to have someone in that country beyond 30 days, you would assume that we probably have an entity. And if we have an entity, we should probably get you transferred into that entity. So again, just trying to be cautious. So, and I think 30 days is a good amount of time for an individual to go in, do what they need to do, and then come out. The scenario that you gave us was that you used about your personal travel. That's where it gets pretty sticky, right? And especially when it's tied to immigration, we have a lot of foreign nationals who have to go renew their visas abroad, and depending on the nationality, they take X number of weeks. Well, some of these foreign nationals decide, hey, well, let me take my vacation and renew my visa together. So that's where it gets really tricky, because we can't tell them don't take vacation, right? That's not right. But we also have to tell them, look, you need to time everything to where you're going to be there less than 30 days. And for the most part, they work with us, and during the summer months they'll spend 30 days and then come back, and then they'll go back again the following year. So, but it is tricky to navigate that.
And I can imagine that 8 years ago, 6 years ago, pre-COVID, certainly, before the technology really came along to the extent that we have it now, it was probably a lot more necessary for leaders or even technical specialists to physically be present in a country to help a deal go through, or to set up, whatever it was that needed to happen with a real estate project. How much are y'all using technology now just to avoid that travel, or avoid those, some of those circumstances, that complicate the immigration status and all those things?
I mean, that's one of the benefits that we saw come out of the pandemic, right? Being able to understand how people can work efficiently from home, right? I mean, you see, I'm at home right now. Oh, I'm sitting at home doing my job, where I used to be in the office, throughout all of my career. So that's the one benefit that I see, that we learn to operate from leveraging technology. And so we really we ask our employees to justify the need to go into that country, right? And that's sort of where we have to give that enablement to the people managers who manage the teams, because unfortunately, immigration is not involved in those discussions. But all we can do is provide the enablement tools for them to have those open discussions with their employees and say, hey, look, you're requesting to go to this country. What is the justification to go into this country versus doing it from just leveraging technology? What I would say is, in our space, with commercial real estate, sometimes you need that face-to-face, right? When you're meeting a client, you're visiting a site. So there is a high level or high volume of travel required for this role, depending on if you're overseeing a project or overseeing a specific building. So there is that need, but where we can help, we try to advise not to travel if you don't need to.
And, we see it in the U.S. where foreign nationals are coming in as, expats to us, coming into the country, and they've got cultural challenges, different management styles, all those kinds of things, and their families are coming, and they've, things have to be done for those families. I imagine that's very similar internationally, whether it's a U.S. citizen going overseas or somebody coming from country A to country B, anywhere. How do y'all, as an organization, help, acculturate, or if that's a word, those families to the way things work in these other countries?
We heavily leverage our RMC, right, our relocation firm, to provide those services or give them that suite of services to the employees who are traveling permanently one way, right? For the short-term assignments, it's a bit loose, right? There, we partner them with a local employee there. We're really focused on leveraging those services to employees who are going to be in that new country, whether it's global in the U.S. We give them that suite of services available to make it available to them. We know that the U.S. citizens and the culture in other countries are not always the same, as you mentioned. So there's considerations that they need to have whenever they're going there. Make sure they're respectful to the culture locally there. But many of those services go through the RMC, not directly from us.
Mm-hmm. Through their relocation firm. And so they provide a lot of that hands-on stuff locally because, again, like you said, I can imagine all the regulations and all that, and then all the cultural differences are just as significant, and having a local boots on the ground. So you've got partners all over the place who offer those things.
Correct. And at the very least, we try to make them available, right? Understanding that we do have the local resources, our local HR teams that does, they have their due diligence that they need to do when bringing someone in. They want to make sure that they're comfortable in the new country, and so a local HR does take a big part of this transition, but we do have the services available through our relocation firm.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. Tomorrow, August 23rd, I'm hosting a webinar entitled Background Check Mythbusters. I've set aside an hour to tackle common misconceptions and questions about employers' use of criminal history, off-duty conduct, background checks, and state-specific laws. Many of the topics are things I commonly encounter in conversations with HR professionals or see posted on social media. This webinar is pre-approved for an hour of recertification credit by both HRCI and SHRM. But do you have a nagging question you've never had a clear answer to, or were embarrassed to ask? Send me your questions when you register for the webinar at imperativeinfo.com. And if you're listening to this episode after August 23rd, you can watch the recording of the webinar for credit for free at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 162 and enter the keyword expat. That's EXPAT. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Francisco Solis. So you're working in immigration with all these different countries, and we hear the challenges employers have bringing foreign talent into the U.S. I mean, especially there's only a certain number of H-1B visas in the lottery every year, and that number hasn't changed in over 30 years. How does the U.S. compare in your experience as far as the ability to bring foreign professional workers into the U.S.? How does that compare to other countries? Are most other countries more liberal or more conservative? And I don't mean that politically, but just, more open to it or more hesitant or more, bureaucratic about it?
I mean, quite honestly, I've always looked at the U.S. immigration as being restrictive, but the more and more that I became immersed in global immigration, it's about the same. There's countries that have quotas, you have X number of people that you can bring in based on how many local hires you have. Right, we have that in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. We have, depending on the size of your organization, you can bring X number of people. Many of these countries have a minimum salary requirement as well, just like the U.S. So I do think that they're very much the same. I think where the U.S. stands out is just the volume of applicants that are trying to come into the U.S. is significant, right? I mean, last year there was almost 800,000 applications for the H-1B. There isn't any other country that is seeing that number of applications for a single visa. right? So imagine that's only 800 applications for the H-1B. Imagine the L1s, the O1s, the J1s, the students. So the U.S. is bringing in and managing, millions of visas a year, whereas there are many of the other countries don't have that volume, but they have the same restrictions. And then just adding in, because we touched on the UK earlier, the UK has, not only is it very difficult to go in, it's very expensive, right? So you're looking to spend on a visa for the UK 25 to 30 grand per visa, and that, depending on the size of your organization,
Wow.
that's very restrictive, right? Organizations like CBRE or other companies who have the funds to sponsor that immigration to that country, it's great. But imagine mid-level, mid-size organizations that $30,000-$40,000 is impactful, then that's restrictive.
And I shared earlier, I travel a lot. I love international travel, mostly because I like to eat and the food's always interesting when I go to other places. But when you've got employees that you're sending internationally, how much attention do you have to pay to unique local circumstances, where there are political instability or crime, things like that? How much of that do you take in and factor into when you're making decisions about who to send or where to send people or whether to recruit locally, those kinds of things?
I mean, that is, the safety of our employees is critical, right? So it's just like any other organization. That's those, geopolitical activity is important. Understanding, if we need to have, similar to having the services available for employees to transition into that country, we need to make sure that we have our safety and security protocols in place as well. We need to have an exit strategy. We need to make sure that they understand, they're cognizant of what's going on in that country prior to transferring there. But I think what we like to look at as well is understanding the family unit that's going in, right? If you're having a single male going into one country, not saying that we don't consider it a high risk, but it's different than having a single female or a family with small children. Completely different assessment that we need to do when we're looking at the different family structure. We also need to look at, and what we tend to do is, if we have, because we want to make sure that we're transparent and as equitable as possible. So, if we're transferring someone who is of the LGBTQ community, we need to take a look at what those countries, what their views are for that LGBT community, because not every country has laws protecting them. So it's a whole assessment that we look at, and that many organizations do the same, right? I mean, they want to make sure that they not only
Sure.
able to do the work there, but that their employees are able to do their work safely.
So we talked about, the legal restrictions on immigration, and setting up corporate structures and all that, and safety issues, technology. What other factors, when CBRE or any, large employer is considering either opening another location in another country or hiring talent in another country, what are other key considerations that things you have to check off the list to make sure that we're making a well-informed decision?
What I would say is, and I'll touch on this one. This is a project that I did on my organization prior to CBRE, and right, what I think is what I would hope that many organizations replicate. We partnered with our talent acquisition team and our legal teams, and we looked at X number of countries that we were looking that had a specific talent pool that we were looking for. In this particular instance, we were looking for software engineers, and we wanted to look at software engineers in Europe. And our talent acquisition teams went out there, did an assessment into 3 different countries. Then once they assessed the 3 countries that they wanted to look at, they brought them over to the immigration team. We did an assessment from the immigration perspective, right? We wanted to understand how quickly and how easily can we process immigration and maximize the talent pool for that country. We ended up going to Ireland because we knew we could hire in Ireland. We can bring in someone in 10 days. There was a high concentration of software engineers in that country. So what I would say is you have to look at it as available resources in that country, plus the ease of hiring and bringing in someone as well. So we were able to hire almost 200 foreign nationals going into Ireland in as little as 4 weeks. That was a massive hiring
Wow.
event. And you don't, and imagine if we had selected one of the other ones that, again, the immigration turnaround was much longer or had a higher restrictions on certain requirements. It would have impacted our hiring event. It would have maybe elongated that 6 months to a year to bring it in. So I think just taking a look at holistically on the whole entire need, some countries you need to consider, depending if you're doing a technology, depending on if you're a tech company, you need to take a look at if your export licenses, making sure that that technology can be produced in that country. You need to take a look at, again, the talent, local talent, the ease of immigration, compensation structure. There's workers' councils in some of these countries where, that it gives additional rights to the employees there. So let's say Germany, their workers' council in Germany is extremely, extremely protective of workers' rights. So you terminate someone there, you're going to have their termination may not be instant. It may be 3 months, 4 months down the line that you'll have to cover. So there's a lot of different things. Again, entry and exit requirements that you need to consider when looking at new countries.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Francisco. I appreciate you joining us for this half hour. We've run it out.
Oh, wow. Well, Mike, thank you so much. This was great. I love talking about immigration. I love talking about what we do. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And we probably could have kept going for a couple more hours before we took a break and reconvened and kept talking. So what I would say, I'll do a small plug to the Texas SHRM conference. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you can make it out to the conference. It's a great conference here in Houston. I know there's going to be a lot of great sessions aside from the one that we're going to be a part of. There's going to be some employment law sessions. There's going to be some navigating through HR sessions. And some of the speakers that are going to be there are going to be amazing, including yourself, right, Mike? So hopefully, if you can make it, go to Texas SHRM on September 19th.
That's perfect. Thank you for the plug. And you, listener, can get more information about the Texas SHRM Global Conference on September 19th at texasshrmglobalconference.org. And the link will also be in the show notes. Thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.